Well, thanks for taking the time to meet with me and
Sure.
speak to everybody. I guess the first thing I wanted to do was talk about the National Press Photographers Association and maybe their role or their advocacy or their support of drones, and especially for drones and photography, drones and journalism, and those kind of things. Could you speak a little bit to the NPPA?
Sure. So the National Press Photographers Association has been around since 1946. We're the voice of visual journalists. We do a lot of things. We do a lot of advocacy. We have a lot of education. We really try and help support journalists, visual journalists in particular, as the voice of visual journalists. And some of those things have to do with First Amendment, the right to record, copyright. We have a very strong code of ethics. So I've done a lot of training with journalists and police about the right to record in public. We became involved with the use of drones for news gathering quite a number of years ago, pretty much right at the very beginning when people started to have commercial use of drones. DJI, the Phantom One. Obviously, people have been flying remote controlled aircraft for well over 60 or 70 years. It's nothing new, but it's this confluence of GPS, tiny motors, better batteries, HD cameras. They've all kind of come together. And the fact that you're now able to get high quality images at a stable platform for a reasonable price really has changed the landscape of things. And we really look at what we do in terms of advocating for the right to photograph and record in public. That drones are that next natural progression of things. We've been very involved, for example, in the fact that quite a number of the National Park Service, the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Forestry Service, pretty much all have by and large banned drones. In terms of the permitting scheme, we were involved. We actually just got a favorable ruling in a case called Price v. Barr, where we submitted an amicus brief where a filmmaker had actually recorded something, filmed a little bit of a movie he was doing, a documentary on the National Park Service land, and was later, not at the time he was doing it, but when the documentary aired, he was served a summons for not having a permit. And he basically challenged that. And that's about a week or two ago, the federal judge ruled that the permitting scheme for filming, at least, was unconstitutional, as we had argued under the First Amendment. So it's those kinds of things that we're very involved in and have participated in a number of things, at least as it pertains to drones. We have the Drone Journalism Leadership Conference Summit every year for 4 years now. This year we did it virtually, but we have the FAA there, the Department of Homeland Security, a number of law enforcement agencies, and then newsroom leaders from major news organizations like Sinclair, USA Today, Gannett, Tegna, McClatchy, and we have discussions about kind of what's the next best step. We've submitted comments about things regarding the final rule that they finally put into place for flights over people, night flights, remote ID. We've met with the FAA on a number of occasions, so we're very involved. I personally have been involved. I was one of the official observers to the Uniform Law Commission, where they were trying to have a drone tort law act. Fortunately, we got them to say maybe this isn't such a good idea, and they ended up not putting that into place. What that would have done is the Uniform Law Commission kind of sets up these model templates for other states then to adopt certain measures, and ALI, the American Law Institute, is looking at something similar. We've been involved with that. NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Agency, had a whole best practices thing quite a number of years ago, and we were one of the stakeholders and participated in those meetings and got them to include, in their best practices, that nothing that was contained therein would supersede the First Amendment rights that people had when using a drone. So we've been really very active. We did a number of trainings when 107 first came into being, where we helped people prepare for the 107 exam. And I am a member now of the advisory board of Drone Responders, which is an organization of first responders and law enforcement. And we obviously bring the media component, and we've participated in a number of panels. I've held and moderated some panels with AUVSI, which is the world's largest association of unmanned systems, both in the air, on the ground, underwater. The FAA has had its symposium. I've done panels for them, and even recently did one for the International Association of Chiefs of Police, where we had the FAA and Department of Homeland Security. Because, one of the things people, I think, should realize is that the first person you're going to come in contact with while you're flying their drone, besides kind of people that are interested or just being nosy, is a police officer. It's very unlikely that you're going to run into an FAA inspector or somebody from the federal government, unless you happen to be operating, like near the Super Bowl or in a place where there's a TFR where they're actively looking. But even, for example, in New York, during the height of the pandemic last year, a number of journalists flew drones over Hart Island, where there were open graves, and they were putting wooden caskets in there, pretty much because so many homeless people were dying. And it was really the only way to see it. And a number of them were cited for what in New York is known as an avigation law, not navigation, but avigation. It's been around for many, many years, which basically limits landing and takeoff from pretty much anywhere in New York City. Fortunately, in most of those cases, we were able, not most of them, all of them, we had the charges dismissed. And in cases where drones were seized, the drones returned. So, I could go on and on. I could drone on and on, which
Right.
I oftentimes use that. But yeah, if you want to ask me a couple other questions, I mean, we've got litigation going on, and we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, the one of the major things I wanted to do is let people know that the MPPA is an advocate for all visual journalists, and the idea, especially when it comes to drones being a tool for visual journalists, that this is a key voice in a sense for the entire visual industry. But one of the things I did want to talk to you about specifically is kind of getting to some of the stuff, that the legislation that is kind of creeping up. I know you've been active with the legislation, the proposed legislation down in Texas, and there's also the Mississippi is starting to kind of speak up again. And I think Utah's Senator Lee, I think, is trying to bring back his bill that was defeated, I think, a year or two ago.
And that's on the federal level. Yeah.
Yeah, on the federal level, as far as to have the ownership of the sky, which is interesting. I mean, I'll let you talk about that, but that Cosby ruling kind of already set the precedent for that for the Supreme Court. But I'll let you go ahead. Maybe start with Texas and some of the stuff that's going.
Sure. And just before I get into that, if people are interested, as I said, we're the voice of visual journalists, all kinds of visual journalists, and nobody really cares what I have to say or what Alicia Calzada, who's the other attorney for NPPA, has to say, but they care based on we're speaking for the members of NPPA, and just as like the National Rifle Association, with over 1 million members, when they speak, people, at least until recently, paid a whole lot of attention. So we would really appreciate support. Please join, or send us support, because we can't do what we do without member support and without a membership. Because, as I said, just me speaking for myself, nobody's going to pay any attention to that. So in Texas, we actually mounted the first challenge to a state law regulating drones, and we just had a recent success. The state of Texas had moved in federal court to dismiss the case, and the judge ruled in our favor. The only thing that he did grant dismissal on was the preemption claim that we brought, in terms of the fact that we believe it's the federal government that should be regulating the national airspace, as they claim to be the ones to do. And it was more of a technicality in that sense. But all of our First Amendment challenges remain, and the case moves forward. So we were very pleased about that. And the problem there is that it was overly broad and vague, and where the state certainly is allowed to do things that serve a governmental interest, they have to be narrowly tailored to serve that interest. And the way the law is drafted, especially, and the fact that they gave all these exemptions, and I think it's like A through T. They had exemptions. They even had one for news gathering, but they intentionally struck that out because there were a lot of forces there, big agriculture, oil and gas, who didn't necessarily want people using drones to report on their activities. So we're going to see how that case progresses. In terms of these other bills, as I mentioned, the Uniform Law Commission very much started out as a group, and as a ALI is also, we're finding, is they're property rights interest groups. Property rights is a very set body of law, and it pretty much controls, what rights you have on the ground in terms of trespass, in terms of the control over your land. But the question really is, where does that extend up to? The FAA says we control the national airspace from a blade of grass up to the heavens. We've even seen over the years where people were using drones to help look for lost people exploring caves. So that was below ground. And the FAA ended up sending a cease and desist order saying, no, you can't do that. I mean, that got resolved, but they talk a lot about controlling this, but we haven't really seen them assert that. It shouldn't be us challenging the states on this. It should be the federal government, because the FAA was kind of brought into being so we didn't have this crazy patchwork across the United States. So you could fly from New York to Los Angeles, and every time you went over a different state, you didn't have a different set of rules that applied. But that's exactly what we're seeing with drones. As a matter of fact, we're seeing it not just at the state level, we're seeing it in different municipalities. So you could have one municipality, one jurisdiction saying nothing above 200 feet or nothing below 200 feet. We all know 400 feet is as high as you can fly, except in certain cases if you're flying within 400 feet of a structure. So they're almost saying, in Texas, they're saying nothing below 400 feet. That's the Texas rule. The federal rule says nothing above 400 feet. That basically creates an absolute ban. So again, we're seeing these kinds of things where what constitutes the use and enjoyment, what constitutes a property right above your land. It's really, really hard to say. And just as I've talked about for many years, this is really nothing new when it comes to the right to privacy. And I find it very interesting that in the late 1800s, when George Eastman invented the brownie, it was really the first time that, somebody could take a camera that they could get for $1 in their hand, go out in the street and take pictures. Because before that, you were either like Matthew Brady, where you had a covered wagon with big cameras and it took a while to set up, or you went to a photographer's studio and you sat with your neck in a brace and you held still for 5 minutes so they could make that exposure. And as soon as that brownie came out, there was this hue and cry of, oh my God, the right to privacy as we know it is over in the 1800s. And 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 Louis Brandeis, who was then a Harvard law student, later become a Supreme Court justice, and Samuel Warren wrote this treatise called A Right to Privacy. And if you Google it, if you just type in Brandeis Right to Privacy and you read it, even though it was written in the late 1800s, you would think that he was talking about drones today, because he talks about the nosy neighbors and the snooping press. And, they banned the use of brownies at the beaches. And when you think about it, it's like people wore more to the beach back then than they wear to church now. But didn't matter. It was, we can't have brownies taking pictures at the beach. And, they somehow resolved those privacy rights. And we're seeing the same thing all over again with drones. It's kind of nothing new. And our advocacy is that there are existing privacy laws already that deal with these kinds of things. You don't have to enact new legislation that's specifically about this technology.
And kind of along those lines too. So in your opinion, in your experience, with these legislators that are proposing these bills and kind of, I wouldn't say grandstanding, but kind of going on the platform of, I support privacy, I support privacy. Do you think, obviously they're trying to appeal to the public that has a concern for it, but do you think a good way to get out there, while the MPPA advocates on like the larger level, but do you think on the individual level, do you think that drone pilots and drone users should be advocates and should go out there and kind of explain or help propose, like, hey, I'm not spying on you, I'm just filming this home for a real estate property listing, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things we've been doing at our Drone Journalism Leadership Summit is bringing together law enforcement. And, what we say is, if you know you're going to be using a drone, let them know. I mean, there's certainly for journalism, there are investigative pieces that you might not want to. But for the most part, unless the law enforcement agency actually has a drone program, they know nothing about drones. They don't know what's proper, what's not proper. And so you go fly your drone and you're getting a locator, getting a beauty shot, whatever. And, grandma sees the drone and she calls the police. And the first thing that happens is the officer gets out of the car, has no idea who you are, what you're doing. And immediately is, I'm in charge, I know. And, they may not know anything. It's very likely that they won't. But, talking to police agencies ahead of time, they may be interested in starting their own drone program. So educating them, giving them some background and basics, inviting them out. Hey, we're going to fly. You want to come out, take a look. But then letting them know, look, this is Channel 7 News. We're going to be out at Main and Court between 11 and 11:10 today. So if you get any calls, it's us. We're just getting a couple of locators. We'll be flying for 10 minutes. Great. Now grandma calls up. Hey, yes, Mrs. Smith. We know that's Channel 7. They'll be there about 10 minutes. Don't worry about it. They don't dispatch an officer. You're not getting into this big he said, she said about what the rules are that and they don't know, but they got the badge and the gun and they're going to win the argument right at that moment. And the last thing you want to be doing, especially if you don't have a visual observer, is to trying to be argued because they'll like land that right away. It's not, I have a picture of two bobbies grappling with a guy with the controls in his hand outside of Gatwick Airport. He had permission from the airport. He was doing it for them. They didn't know. And they're fighting with him over the controls. Not safe, not a good idea, but we're in charge and we know. So having that outreach, wearing vests, saying who you are, that's another thing. Even if you didn't call, if the vest is, says drone operator, WKBW TV station I used to work for, they're at least going to be like, okay, it's probably not likely this is a terrorist. This is, oh, it's channel. All right. And they approach you completely differently, than they would if they have no idea who it is, especially, with all these drones being used for nefarious purposes. I mean, there are certainly real concerns. I mean, when I talk to law enforcement, just flying a drone, for example, over a stadium with 80,000 people, whenever we get back to having a stadium with that many people. And all it had to do was not be carrying a bomb or explosives or something, but just drop white talcum powder. The panic that would ensue, with people think it's ricin, it's, that in itself would cause a major injuries, if not deaths. So they certainly have realistic things. That's why they wanted to get remote ID in place. We're glad, that what they came up with as a final rule was not as bad as we thought it was going to be. This will enable flights over people, night flights, all of those things. So we've been advocating for these kinds of things all along, but certainly if you can be good stakeholders out there, not be, the nitwits who are flying too low, who are flying over people, who are flying in fireworks, who are doing all the kinds of things that you're not supposed to do. As journalists, we don't want to be the story. We don't want to be the poster child for don't do this, because that's not going to reflect well on either individual journalists wanting to use drones or on news organizations. I mean, it certainly makes more sense, and we've talked about this too. So big forest fires out in California. Economically and safety wise, which makes more sense, to fly a Bell Jet Ranger out at $1,500 an hour to make 3 orbits coordinating with the incident commander between firefighting operation to get 30 seconds to a minute of high definition video and fly back again? Or when you've got a crew on the ground already covering the forest fire, talk to the incident commander. Hey, we've got a break in operations. We're putting up our drone, and you get the same images without risking, the life, without spending all that money, and you got the crew there anyway. So it's those kinds of things. Again, education. People need to get used to it. And just like, when they talked about the Tin Lizzie, oh my God, everybody rode around on horses. What is this automobile thing? When, locomotives came through. I mean, every technology, or what's been interesting is that the law is always catching up to technology. It comes along, and then we have to figure out what the rules are. And certainly, drone operators want certainty. But the problem nowadays that we're seeing is that technology is moving at this exponential rate, and the law is like moving glacially. And the divide, it just gets larger, especially when you've got, for example, a Congress that can't agree whether it's daytime or nighttime outside, then coming up with legislation that makes sense. It's more difficult, but we will see that, maybe not in my lifetime, but we will see that eventually happen. But really, having the public be educated, having drones be shown for good, that, hey, we were looking for this an adult who had Alzheimer's. He wandered away. We've been searching for him, and we keep hearing these stories. The police are out, with 40 or 50 people combing the area, and then a drone person, operator, will come along and say, hey, would you like me to help? Sure. Puts up the drone, and within 5 or 10 minutes, he's right over here. We found him, because obviously we know that things that you can see from the air are a whole lot better than seeing things from the ground sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great example, and the fact that the advocacy out there, that we have to go out there and kind of be a good good stewards of the whole industry. Because if one bad thing happens, like for example, the incident where the guy wanted to see what was happening in his neighborhood here in Los Angeles and put the drone up, and at night, because there was some sirens and stuff, so he put the drone up and hit a police helicopter, and the FAA came in, and FBI fined him and ticketed him, and and when too many of those situations do cause a black eye for the industry, and makes it harder for the advocacy, for harder for us to say like, hey, no, this is really legit reason. So
trust me, I've pushed back. There was a whole report on one of the networks about, showing a drone going through a wing of an airplane. That whole thing got really set up. I push back with news organizations that we have a relationship with and say, listen, you guys use drones all the time for stand-ups, for this, for that. Stop creating this public hysteria about it. It's not helpful to you or anybody else. You think about, again, in London, Heathrow, they claimed there was a drone and they shut down the whole airport, and tens of thousands of people were, like the flights were canceled, grounded, whatever, and they blamed the drone. And then at the end of the day, even after they arrested a couple who they said, it turned out it wasn't a drone. They were gantry cranes that had warning lights on them that people mistook as drones, or pilots saying, oh, we just saw a drone go by us at, 15,000 feet. And it's like,
yeah.
So you really need to be careful and vet that reporting as well. And that's part of the advocacy we do.
Right. And it's hard to, when that happens, it's hard to unring a bell, because all people just hear drone, and then that's all they hear. And then that's like, oh, drones are bad.
Right.
That's another thing too. I mean, that goes back to the television, like network television, with during sweeps. Sometimes they'll do something to play up the parent, like Today Show did that one morning broadcast where, our drones peeping in your window, and you use it. This is your drone that you're using, that NBC uses.
And we've come a long way too, because when you think about it, the only time we used to hear the word drones had to deal with reapers and predators and these things that are the size of aircraft that carried rockets and missiles and did all kinds of bad things. And as a matter of fact, for a long time, AUVSI wanted them called, UAS or UAV. But just like, other things that came into the lexicon, it's drones. One of the first conferences I went to from AUVSI, in the media lounge, the password for the Wi-Fi in the media lounge was "Don't say drones," all one word. But drones it is, and it's here to stay. And they're not, this nefarious thing, but law enforcement definitely is, always talks about the clueless, the careless, and the criminal, and they basically look at people that way. So you could be doing everything right as a drone operator, and don't be surprised that some Yahoo comes in and everybody's looking on, all right, whose drone is that? And then that's going to get everybody grounded until they figure it out. Or with remote ID, they'll be able to know, which is one of the reasons they wanted to put that in place.
Yeah, one of the last things I wanted to touch on, the new regulations and new rules that the FAA put out. Do you think that that's a good step forward? And do you think that shows signs that the FAA is really working with the industry and listening and trying to come up with ways that we can all together move forward?
Absolutely. We wanted flights over people for a while. We wanted night flights. They were about ready to do them. A number of law enforcement agencies expressed their concern and said, yeah, not until we get remote ID. Yes. Are they behind? Were they behind? Just like Part 107 was 18 months or so behind when that final rule was supposed to be. This final rule was supposed to be done earlier, but we're getting there. And, the remote ID is not that onerous. It's not going to be in place for a while. And hopefully the plan is to be able to either do software upgrades to existing drones or add on modules that are not too costly, and then don't change the whole weight of the drone, so that implies the flights over people, because that itself is based on weight and the damage that they could do. So there's all these things going on, but they will work those out. I mean, we're seeing the new rules as well, where you still have to go to a test site to get your initial 107, but now they've loosened things up, and the recurrent test will be something that you can do remotely. They call it training, not testing. But that will be part of knowing about the remote ID and the night flights and the flights over people. So they make that easier. I mean, the one thing that I asked the FAA and got clarification on, so if your initial 2-year period expired, do you have to go back to start? And they said, nope, you can just do the recurrent. And, so wait until after March, when the recurrent will be online, and it will have the flights over people remote ID and night flight training in there. So yeah, we're getting there, and we're moving along. When you think about, the progress of other technologies, we're starting to pick up a little bit of speed.
Great. That's thank you for the time, and thank you
Sure.
for doing this. I appreciate the information.
My pleasure. Hopefully, people will appreciate it, learn something, and help support NPPA so we can keep doing what we've been doing.